The helicopter's spotlight swept across the trees. Officers shouted, dogs barked. They weren't looking for Marcus. They were hunting a dangerous suspect in the woods that night. But somehow Marcus became the one cornered by the searchlights,
Move in.
the dogs,
Through the window.
and a finger on the trigger.
Watch the corners.
The night began like any other, quiet, empty, and unbothered by the weight of the world. The highway stretched ahead of Marcus Bell like a dark ribbon without an end, illuminated only by the faint glow of passing reflectors and the gentle rhythm of his headlights. He was tired, but satisfied. A long week of training had finally ended, and his new job contract was in hand. The future felt like something that might finally lean in his favor. But nights like this have a way of twisting themselves into stories people never forget. Stories that live in families, passed down as warnings. Stories where everything can change in a single breath, a single mile, a single wrong moment. Marcus had no idea he was less than 5 minutes away from one of those moments. He tapped the steering wheel lightly, humming along to the soft music playing in the background. There was no rush, no tension, just the open road and a man heading home. It was 10:47 p.m. when the peace broke. At first, it was only a flicker. A flash he thought came from some distant truck or sign, but then came the second one and the third, until suddenly the rearview mirror exploded with violent streaks of blue and red. Marcus blinked, confused. He checked his speed instinctively. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't swerving. Everything was correct. Seatbelt, lights, registration, everything. There was no reason for a stop. Yet the police lights behind him grew brighter. And then out of nowhere, 2 more sets of lights joined them. 3 patrol cars, all accelerated, straight at him. For a moment, Marcus felt something he couldn't name. Not fear, not yet. More like disbelief, like the kind that sits between confusion and panic. Slowly, he pulled his foot from the gas and let the car drift toward the side of the highway. The rumble strips vibrated beneath him. His hands tightened. His breathing shifted. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. 3 cars? For what? His heart began to push harder, each beat sharpening into something painful. Fear was the next visitor. The kind black parents warn their children about long before they can even reach the pedals of a car. The kind that arrives the moment blue lights appear behind you at night. The patrol vehicles fanned out around him with aggressive precision, one behind him, one angled toward his left, the third sliding sharply to his right, boxing him in. The tires screeched, gravel shot up into the air. The night, once silent, became a stage for authority. Marcus sat frozen. This wasn't a traffic stop. This looked like a manhunt. His breath quickened. He lifted both hands slowly, placing them on the steering wheel where they could be seen clearly. His fingers shook, his chest tightened. The quiet voice inside him repeated the same words every black man learns. Stay calm, don't move fast, don't argue, don't die. In the silence, the doors of the patrol cars burst open. 4 officers stepped out, not with flashlights, not with curiosity, but with their guns already raised, guns pointed directly at him. A sudden wave of cold ran across Marcus's skin. His body felt both heavy and weightless, as though he'd slipped into a nightmare and was struggling to wake. All he could hear was the thundering of his own heartbeat and the faint buzz of radios crackling in the dark. Time slowed in a way that felt unnatural, as if the night itself was holding its breath. He wanted to explain. He wanted to shout that he wasn't the man they were looking for. He wanted to tell them he hadn't done anything wrong. But none of that mattered, because in moments like this, guilt isn't something you prove. It's something the world decides for you. The officers' steps were heavy, synchronized, almost military. Their weapons glinted under the pale streetlights. The air tasted metallic, like the moments before a storm hits. Marcus lifted his trembling hands higher. He thought about his mother, who lived 2 states away. He thought about the job he'd just earned, the life he was trying to build. He wondered if this was really how it would end, on some lonely stretch of highway, with men who didn't even know his name deciding the final shape of his story. One of the officers moved closer, slow and controlled. He was large, broad-shouldered, with a stare cold enough to cut through the night air. His stance wasn't that of someone curious or concerned. It was the posture of someone who had already decided the man in front of him was guilty. The lights continued flashing, painting the scene in pulsing waves of blue and red. Marcus's vision blurred around the edges, but he kept his focus straight ahead, praying silently for restraint, for fairness, for anything that resembled humanity. But humanity was the farthest thing from this moment. Something else was at play, something deeper, something uglier. Only later would Marcus discover that earlier that evening an armed robbery had gone terribly wrong. A white suspect had led officers on a chase before disappearing into the woods. His car, a gray sedan, had been abandoned. Minutes later, a call went out to search for a matching vehicle. Marcus was driving a gray sedan, the perfect target, the perfect scapegoat, the perfect match. But there was another detail, one Marcus couldn't have known. The robbery suspect had connections inside the department, people who wanted him protected, people who needed someone else to take the blame. Tonight, Marcus wasn't just unlucky, he was being set up. The night turned colder. The wind sharpened. His muscles locked as adrenaline flooded through him. He stayed still, hands visibly raised, breathing shallow. And then something unexpected happened. From the far side of the highway, headlights approached, slow, cautious, belonging to a vehicle Marcus hadn't noticed before. Inside that vehicle was someone who would eventually change everything. Someone who knew the truth about the robbery. Someone who understood the danger Marcus was in. But for now, Marcus was alone, surrounded, outnumbered, and moments away from a decision that could end his life. The officers moved closer. The night began closing in. And Marcus Bell realized that nothing about this stop was routine, and survival was no longer guaranteed. The night held its breath as the officers approached, their footsteps deliberate, the gravel grinding beneath their boots like teeth. Marcus Bell sat frozen behind the wheel, hands lifted high, his chest tightening with every step they took toward him. A man boxed in, not by concrete or metal, but by fear woven into the history of people who looked like him. The flashing lights painted his skin in violent strokes of red and blue. The colors pulsed like warnings from the universe itself, warnings that tonight was no ordinary night. Tonight, he had been chosen, wrongly, unfairly, but chosen all the same. Behind him, the officers moved with a cold certainty, as if they were already writing the final chapter of his story. As if they had decided exactly who he was long before they even saw his face. He could feel their assumptions pressing against the back of his neck like weight. Criminal, threat, problem. A man they needed to control. A man they needed to neutralize. A man who fit the description simply because of the skin he was born in. The whisper of a breeze swept across the highway, pushing the stench of burned rubber and dust into the air. The sound of radios crackled like distant thunder. The tension grew thicker, heavier. Marcus could almost taste it. The officers fanned out, surrounding his sedan in a tightening circle. The front officer, the largest of the four, moved in first. His eyes narrowed, not with caution, but with something else. Something dangerous. Something personal. Marcus could sense it like a vibration in the air. He didn't know the man's name yet, but he would soon learn it. And it would matter. Far down the road, unnoticed by the officers, a vehicle rolled to a slow stop on the opposite shoulder. Its headlights dimmed. The driver inside lowered themselves carefully, choosing caution over boldness. They had been following the radio chatter since the robbery had occurred. They had seen the getaway car left abandoned hours earlier, and they knew one crucial detail the officers were ignoring. The suspect they were after wasn't black. He wasn't even close. But Marcus had the same type of car. And tonight, for these officers, that was all that mattered. The unknown witness watched cautiously, staying hidden behind their dashboard, phone already recording. A quiet promise formed inside them. If something went wrong tonight, if this turned into one of those stories that made headlines for all the wrong reasons, they would not remain silent. Back inside his car, Marcus closed his eyes just long enough to gather strength. He inhaled slowly, exhaled even slower. His heart hammered against his ribs, each beat echoing in the hollow space of his chest. He was terrified. The kind of terror that doesn't shout or scream but paralyzes. The kind of terror that comes from knowing your life depends on staying perfectly still. He thought about his mother again. Her voice, her warnings, her prayers. He wondered if she could somehow sense what was happening to him right now. He wondered if she would wake up in the middle of the night with a heaviness on her chest and not know why. The officer finally reached his door, the gun steady, unwavering. Marcus didn't dare look at him directly. He kept his gaze forward, hands frozen above the wheel. He felt sweat gathering at the back of his neck despite the cool breeze creeping through the cracked window. The officer circled the car slowly, predatory, calculated, as if expecting Marcus to pounce at any moment, as if expecting him to do something wrong. But Marcus stayed still. Inside the patrol cars behind them, two other officers exchanged glances. Tension flickered between them, not fear, but something more like anticipation. They had been told the robbery suspect was dangerous, armed, unstable. They were told he had injured one of their own, and they wanted payback. That was the lie fed to them earlier, a lie that justified everything they were about to do. That lie would fuel the next hour of Marcus Bell's life. The supervisor, a thinner man with sharp eyes and a tight jaw, approached slowly from behind. His posture didn't match the others. His gun wasn't raised as high. His movements were tense, but not aggressive. As if he wasn't entirely convinced about this stop. As if he sensed the pieces weren't adding up. He scanned Marcus's license plate. The model, the year, the color, it matched the dispatch report. But so did hundreds of cars in the state. He looked at Marcus's still hands, his posture, his trembling shoulders. None of it aligned with the description of the suspect who had escaped earlier. But the supervisor didn't speak. He watched, he observed, but he didn't intervene. Not yet. Marcus's breathing became shallow as the primary officer reached his window. The lights behind him formed a glowing halo of authority. A man backed by a badge, backed by a system, backed by power. Marcus was backed by hope. Barely. The officer leaned in slightly, scanning the interior of the car with narrow, unforgiving eyes. Marcus didn't move, not even to swallow. The night thickened around them, the air turning heavier. For a brief second, the officer's face came into clear view under the flashing lights. And for the first time, Marcus saw something in his eyes. Something colder than anger, colder than authority. A kind of satisfaction, as if he had been waiting for someone like Marcus, as if this moment made sense to him. Farther up the road, another car slowed, observing the scene. A couple inside whispered nervously. They had seen situations like this before, too many times, and they didn't want to be the next set of silent witnesses who drove past and regretted it later. They parked their car farther down, gathering the courage to step out with their phones recording. This was becoming bigger than the officers realized. Marcus felt a sudden rush of heat through his body. A strange sense of danger rose inside him, as if his instincts were screaming louder than his thoughts. He realized in that moment that it didn't matter how calm he stayed. It didn't matter how slow he moved. It didn't matter how polite or compliant he was. The truth was far more frightening. They weren't here to question him. They were here to claim him. Claim him as the suspect. Claim him as the threat. Claim him as the story they needed to tell, even if it was a lie. The officer finally spoke, not with words Marcus could hear, but with an action more dangerous than any order. He reached for the door handle. Marcus's lungs locked. The witness across the road zoomed in on their recording. The supervisor stiffened, and the next few seconds would determine whether Marcus Bell survived the night or became another name added to a statistic. The officer's hand tightened around the door handle, his fingers curled with quiet aggression, the metal clinking softly. That small sound, barely audible, hit Marcus like a lightning strike. It wasn't the door he was opening. It was destiny, or doom. And Marcus could feel the razor-thin line between the two shifting beneath him like a trembling wire. Inside the car, Marcus remained perfectly still. Not a twitch, not a turn. His muscles locked from the neck down, as if his body had turned to stone under the crushing weight of fear. He had seen videos, read names, memorized tragedies. He knew how quickly moments like this could spiral. Outside, the night swallowed the world in silence. The officer pulled harder. The supervisor took a step forward. The witness zoomed in. Cars passing on the opposite lane slowed almost unconsciously, as if sensing something was unraveling in real time. Marcus felt the sound of his own heartbeat echoing against the window glass. Deep, fast, pounding. His ears rang. His vision tightened at the edges. Every instinct begged him to run, to leave, to disappear. But he knew better. Movement meant danger. Danger meant justification. Justification meant headlines and hashtags and vigils lit by candles that never should have been required in the first place. The officer suddenly yanked the handle. The locked door resisted. A flicker of irritation broke across his face. That irritation carried centuries of power behind it. The supervisor's voice rose in warning, but not loud enough, not forceful enough, not soon enough. And then the officer stepped back, raised the weapon higher, and barked a silent command through gestures alone, the kind of gestures that told other officers he's resisting. Even though Marcus hadn't moved, even though Marcus was shaking, the officers surrounding the car tightened their formation. One angled his flashlight into Marcus's eyes with a blinding beam, burning through his vision until all he saw was white static. Another moved toward the rear of the car, hand clamped on his holster. A third officer positioned himself near the passenger door, ready to force entry from the opposite side. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The light seared lines across his retina. He could feel the fear rising in waves, flushing his skin, cracking through his composure. A memory surfaced, one from childhood, of his mother telling him that fear wasn't a weakness. Fear was a signal, a warning, a voice urging you to protect yourself. But she had never taught him what to do when fear arrived in the shape of authority. When protection looked like total compliance, and even compliance wasn't enough. He lowered his chin slowly, showing he wasn't a threat. His shoulders trembled, sweat traced lines down his temples. But the officer at the driver's side didn't care about his fear. He cared about control. With a sudden snap, he struck the window with his flashlight. A hard, deliberate hit, not enough to break it, just enough to send a message. I can, and I will. Marcus jerked at the sound. The officer stepped back again, assessing, planning. Down the road, the couple who had stopped stepped out of their car with their phones recording now. Their hands shook. Their voices whispered prayers for a stranger they had never met, but who now felt like someone they needed to protect. Not physically, but through truth. Across the street, the hidden witness kept recording, zooming in, capturing every micro-movement the officers made. They had been waiting for a moment like this, not because they wanted trouble, but because they knew how quickly truth could vanish without proof. Back at the scene, the supervisor finally moved closer. His jaw was tight, his eyes darting across the officers' positions. Something wasn't right. The level of force didn't match the reality in front of him. He knew it, he felt it, but he also knew the officer leading this stop. A man known for aggression, a man who rarely faced consequences, a man whose reports were always supported by his chosen narrative. The supervisor was caught between duty and politics, between justice and job security. Marcus could sense a shift in the air. Something felt wrong, more wrong than the stop itself. A deeper tension was building, something unseen, something inevitable. Suddenly, the officer at the passenger side began pounding on the window, shouting through gestures again, demanding compliance, demanding movement, demanding something, anything, that could be twisted later into the words non-compliant or aggressive. Marcus didn't respond. He couldn't. Fear had sealed his voice shut. The officer raised his weapon and pointed it directly into the car. The supervisor barked out a warning, this time louder. The officers hesitated, barely, but the hesitation didn't last long. Inside the car, Marcus finally inhaled, a sharp, terrified gasp, the kind that comes not from fear alone, but from desperation. His vision blurred, his chest tightened. A wave of dizziness washed over him. He felt like his life was slipping out of his control, like he was fading behind the moment, watching himself from outside his own body. And then, the officer at the driver's side holstered his gun, switched tactics, and reached for a tool clipped to his belt, a metal window punch, the kind used to break glass instantly. The witnesses stiffened. The supervisor froze. The other officers braced. Marcus's eyes widened. Time slowed. He understood now. They weren't trying to get him out of the car. They were trying to force the situation to escalate. The officer positioned the punch against the window, steady, deliberate. The witness recording whispered a plea to no one but the wind. The couple down the road stepped closer, phones trembling. Marcus's chest rose once, sharply, as if his body understood this could be the last breath he ever took. And then, the window shattered. Glass exploded inward, raining across Marcus's lap, his arms, his seat. The sound blasted into the night like a gunshot. Marcus flinched hard, instinctively pulling his head away from the impact. That single movement, purely reflexive, was exactly what the officers had been waiting for. In that split second, everything changed. Hands reached inside the broken window. Weapons were raised. Boots pounded toward the driver's side. Chaos erupted with violent precision. And Marcus Bell, a man who only wanted to get home, was now marked as a threat, not because of what he did, but because of what they expected him to do. And the night was far from done with him. The night the dash cam footage leaked, the entire city seemed to inhale the same breath and hold it. It spread across social media like a spark on dried grass, igniting anger, disbelief, sorrow, and fear all at once. Clips circulated without context. Marcus begging on the side of the highway, Officer Grayson's gun trembling in his hands, the screams, the gravel scraping, the collapsing weight of a moment that never should have happened. But the version that went viral wasn't the full story. It was edited, cropped, rearranged. Someone wanted the world to see Marcus as the aggressor. Someone wanted him erased. As the storm online grew louder, Marcus stayed inside his apartment, curtains drawn, lights off. The safest place for a black man under fire was never outside. Tonight, it wasn't even outside his own head. He kept replaying the highway, the fear in his stomach when blue lights hit the mirror, the way his hands shook on the wheel, the way silence felt like the final warning before something irreversible. Every time he blinked, he saw the gun. Every time he swallowed, he tasted gravel. Every time he exhaled, his lungs trembled. He didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on knees, trying to make sense of how fast the system can move when it wants someone gone. Not protected, not investigated, gone. Across the city, someone else wasn't sleeping either. The anonymous whistleblower. She sat in a dimly lit kitchen, headphones on, listening to the real, unedited audio over and over. She knew its value, she knew its danger, and she knew the risk of timing. She wasn't just leaking files, she was building a timeline, a pattern, a chain that linked crooked officers, forced stops, silenced victims, and a hierarchy of protection that ran deeper than most realized. She had already lost 2 friends in the department for asking the wrong questions. She wouldn't lose herself next, not without exposing the truth. While the online world argued, the internal world of the police department panicked quietly behind glass doors and hallway whispers. Chief Rowland called emergency meetings that never leaked to the public. Lawyers arrived before sunrise. Officers were instructed not to speak to media. Phones were confiscated. Computers checked. Hard drives wiped. This was not about justice. This was about containment. Grayson, the officer who pinned Marcus, was placed on administrative leave with pay, a phrase that always sounded like a reward for wrongdoing. He was told to stay low, keep quiet, and trust that the department would handle the narrative. But Grayson couldn't sleep either. Behind his arrogance, behind the cold stare that the city saw, was a man unraveling. A man who knew he had crossed a line, not in the moment, but long before, when he accepted that his badge gave him the right to intimidate, to threaten, to control. For the first time, he felt the consequences closing in. Not because he cared about Marcus, but because he finally realized he was expendable. Inside Marcus's apartment, the night grew heavier. His daughter called 3 times, worried after seeing the edited video online. His mother prayed. His sister asked if she should fly into town. But Marcus wasn't ready to speak. He wasn't ready to feel. He wasn't ready to break. He stood at the window, staring out at a quiet street, wondering how many other men stood just like this. Inside dim apartments, curtains drawn, afraid of a world that claimed to protect them. Then came the knock. Soft, intentional, unmistakably cautious. Marcus froze. Another knock. 3 slow taps. The pattern was familiar. It was the same knock the whistleblower used in anonymous drop-offs, the same rhythm that had led him to the first hidden files, the same signal that trouble and truth were never far apart. Marcus opened the door only halfway. A small flash drive slid across the floor and stopped at his feet. No words, no face, no explanation. Only a whisper from the hallway as footsteps retreated. "It's worse than you think, and it's bigger than just you." Marcus's pulse hammered against his ribs as he picked it up. Whatever was on this drive wasn't just evidence. It was a fuse waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to light it. He closed the door, locked it, and sat on the floor in front of his laptop. The city outside buzzed with chaos, headlines, and accusations. But in this quiet room, Marcus was about to uncover the part of the story no one else had seen yet. The part the department was willing to destroy lives to protect. He plugged in the drive. A folder appeared, one file, a name he recognized. a name that made his throat tighten. Operation Nightshade, Master Recordings. The title glowed on the screen like a warning. He clicked. Static, then voices, officers, plans, strategies, checkpoints, and then something else, his own name. Mentioned, targeted, tracked. The last voice convinced him this conspiracy was far deeper than one traffic stop. Chief Rowland, giving orders, approving actions, authorizing what should never have been done. The truth hit Marcus with the force of a baton across the chest. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't overreach. This was premeditated, planned, executed, and recorded. The fear that once paralyzed him began to transform into anger, into clarity, into a resolve he didn't know he still possessed. The highway was never the start. It was step 3, and step 4 was already unfolding. When Marcus finished listening to the recordings, the room around him felt colder, smaller, almost airless. He sat hunched forward, elbows on his thighs, head bowed, palms trembling slightly, the posture of a man who had just discovered a truth large enough to crush him. Operation Nightshade, a blueprint for targeted intimidation, a network of officers handpicked for their willingness to bend, to obey, to remain loyal to the wrong people. A list of civilians marked as potential threats: teachers, activists, journalists, store owners, and men like Marcus. All for reasons that didn't appear on paper but lived in prejudice. The file wasn't an accident. It wasn't a leak. It was a warning and a plea. Because buried in the audio, in between coded conversations and veiled threats, was a second voice. One trying to steer the narrative, trying to feed clues, trying to leave breadcrumbs. The whistleblower. Marcus rewound the recording 3 times just to be sure. She was risking her career, her freedom, maybe even her life. She had embedded her voice carefully, hidden beneath static, like a ghost whispering through the wires. He heard her say it faintly. "They won't stop until someone forces the city to look. You were never meant to survive that stop." The truth shook him to his core. The highway wasn't a random pullover. It had a purpose, a time, a target: him. Outside Marcus's window, the streets were changing. People gathered at corners with signs and phones, chanting names of past victims. Car horns echoed. Sirens wailed in the distance. Helicopters hovered low, drowning the quiet that once comforted him. The city wasn't just reacting to a video anymore. They were reacting to a pattern, a fracture, a truth that refused to stay buried. In the police department, the walls felt tighter, the hallways darker. Officers whispered as if sound itself had become dangerous. Internal affairs moved like ghosts, asking questions no one wanted to answer. Chief Rowland held closed-door meetings with men whose badges were polished, but consciences were not. Grayson, the officer who held Marcus on the pavement, paced his living room, sweating through his shirt, replaying everything in his head. He had expected the department to protect him fully, but he saw their new looks, their new calculations. Someone had leaked the unedited audio, and Rowland had to find a scapegoat. Grayson knew it, and he feared he already knew who it would be. His phone buzzed constantly, Unknown numbers, reporters, private investigators, threats, and messages from people he once called brothers. He regretted the incident only because the system that emboldened him was now ready to sacrifice him. Across town, the whistleblower prepared her final move. She packed her bag with hard drives, printed files, and a burner phone. She typed a message but didn't send it yet. She had one rule: never expose the truth until someone is ready to survive it. Tonight, Marcus wasn't ready, but he was willing. Before she could leave her apartment, she noticed the sound of a car engine idling too long outside. Her lights were off, blinds down, but her instincts were sharper than fear. She reached for her bag, grabbed the drives, and slipped out the back stairwell. She didn't have long, because inside Marcus's building, another set of events was unfolding. Officer Caldwell, the quiet one, the one who rarely smiled, the one who had been present during many suspicious stops, was climbing the stairs. He wasn't in uniform. He wasn't supposed to be here. And he wasn't alone. Two more officers followed, whispering about how Roland wants this cleaned before the press escalates it. Marcus felt it before he heard it, the subtle vibration in the floorboards, the faint echo of shoes moving with intention. He stood slowly. A shadow passed under his door, then another, then a third. Marcus backed toward the kitchen, heart pounding in his throat. The laptop still glowed on the table. Operation Nightshade paused mid-recording. He didn't know how they found him. He didn't know how much they knew. But he knew one thing. If he was silenced tonight, the truth would die with him. A soft click echoed through the hallway, metal against metal, a lock being tested. Marcus held his breath. Then a low voice outside the door murmured, "He's alone. Let's move." The doorknob began to twist. Marcus scanned the room desperately. No weapon, no escape, no allies close enough to call. Just him, just the truth, just the night pressing in from all sides. But before the door could open, footsteps thundered up the stairwell, heavy, fast, determined. Someone else was coming, someone who had been listening, watching, waiting. The whistleblower, breathless, clutching her bag of evidence, turned the corner at full speed. She wasn't here to run. She was here to stop something irreversible. What happened next would determine whether this story became another tragedy, or the first step toward exposing everything the city feared to confront. And either way, someone would not leave this hallway untouched. The hallway outside Marcus's apartment had never felt so small, so suffocating, so full of danger. It was a narrow space where choices collapsed into instinct, where breath felt like borrowed time, where the walls seemed to listen. The officers at his door tightened their formation. Caldwell raised a gloved hand, silently signaling for the others to get ready. No words, no hesitation, just the cold efficiency of men who had done this before. Inside the apartment, Marcus could hear every scrape of shoe leather, every whisper, every heartbeat that wasn't his. His legs trembled, but not from fear, from clarity. This was always the next step. This was always coming. He stepped back slowly, grabbing his laptop with one hand and clutching the flash drive in the other. The truth was small enough to fit in his palm, and dangerous enough to cost him everything. Then, A collision of footsteps echoed up the stairwell. Fast. Urgent. Desperate. Caldwell froze. The two officers flanking him exchanged quick glances, and then she appeared. The whistleblower. Her hoodie was soaked with sweat, her hands trembling as she clutched her bag full of evidence. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to reveal herself. But some moments demand sacrifice. For a second, everything paused. Caldwell saw her. She saw him. Marcus felt the shift before he understood it. Then the hallway erupted. Caldwell snapped into motion, reaching for her arm. But she spun away, slamming her shoulder into him with every ounce of strength she had left. The bag tore open. Hard drives clattered across the floor like scattered truth spilling into the world. The officers lunged. She kicked one in the knee, grabbed another by the sleeve, and pushed him into the wall. But she wasn't strong enough to fight three men trained for violence. Caldwell caught her by the collar, yanking her backward with brutal force. Her head hit the wall with a sickening thud. Marcus felt the impact in his bones. He couldn't just watch. He threw open his door. The officers spun toward him, but it was too late. The whistleblower shoved a small silver drive across the floor toward Marcus. It slid fast, stopping right at his foot. Her voice cracked through the chaos. "This is the real insurance. Don't let them bury it." Before Marcus could move, Caldwell struck her across the jaw. She collapsed. Marcus lunged forward, too fast, too emotional, too human, and one of the officers slammed him back into the doorframe. Pain shot through his ribs. His vision blurred, but even dazed, he saw it clearly. Caldwell reaching into his jacket, reaching for a weapon, reaching to make sure the story ended here. Marcus scrambled to his feet, gripping the silver drive so tight it cut into his skin. He backed into the apartment, one step, then another, trying to stay between Caldwell and the laptop, between the truth and the void. Caldwell entered with a slow, predatory calm, gun raised. "You were never supposed to survive that stop," he muttered. The words were confirmation, an admission, a verdict. Marcus braced himself. Then something happened. Caldwell didn't expect. The whistleblower moved. Barely conscious, barely breathing, but alive. She dragged herself up on trembling arms, blood running down her cheek. She whispered the officer's name. Not Caldwell's. The man behind him. The one holding the radio. The one silent the whole time. "O'Malley, you don't have to follow him anymore." A crack appeared in the tension, a sliver of hesitation, a question Marcus never thought he would see in an officer's eyes. O'Malley stepped back, not forward. For the first time, Caldwell looked unsure. He barked a command. O'Malley didn't respond. He looked at Marcus, at the whistleblower, at the gun in Caldwell's hand. And then, slowly, painfully, he lowered his radio to the ground. Caldwell cursed under his breath and turned his weapon fully toward Marcus. This was the moment. Everything narrowed, everything slowed, and everything snapped at once. The whistleblower hurled herself at Caldwell's legs with the last of her strength. He stumbled, just enough, just long enough, for Marcus to dive behind the kitchen counter. Caldwell fired. The bullet hit the wall inches from Marcus's head, exploding plaster across the counter. O'Malley grabbed Caldwell from behind, wrestling for the gun. A single shot rang out, so loud it drowned the world. For a moment, no one moved. Then Caldwell collapsed to the floor, and the gun slid out of his hand. O'Malley stared at him, shaking, horrified, breathless. He hadn't meant to fire. He hadn't meant to choose a side, but he had. Caldwell wasn't dead, but he wasn't getting up. Sirens grew louder outside, the arrival of police who weren't part of the operation. The whistleblower finally fell backward, exhausted, tears slipping silently down her face. Marcus crawled toward her, holding both drives in his hands. She looked at him, eyes heavy, voice barely audible. "You're the only one who can finish this. Make the world see." He nodded. Not because he was brave, not because he wanted to be a symbol, but because the truth was heavier than fear, and someone had to carry it. News helicopters flooded the sky. Internal affairs took control of the scene. O'Malley surrendered with shaking hands. Caldwell was taken away on a stretcher. The whistleblower was rushed to the hospital, alive, but barely. And Marcus? He walked out of his building holding the silver drive, the real evidence, the real story, the real truth. Camera flashes burst around him, reporters shouting his name, the city roaring with outrage and hope. For the first time since the highway stop, he didn't feel alone. He lifted the drive in the air, a small object, but heavy enough to shatter a system. And he whispered to himself, "This time, they won't bury me."